The perfect MMO. This is something that we're all searching for. A game that is so undeniably, so absolutely consuming for us that we become infatuated with it, incapable of doing anything else. That ain't Tower Fantasy. But of the 60 odd hours that I've put into it, I dare say it came pretty close.
For a week or two.
Now today, I want to give my impressions over the course of a 3-week period spent in Tower Fantasy's global closed beta, logging in almost every day to make sure that I didn't fall behind. Quick shout out to our patrons over on Patreon. This allows you to directly support us if you're interested. Every patron will have their name appear at the beginning of every single YouTube video, and you'll be immortalized in the MMO genre forever. Tower Fantasy is an MMO. The devs list the game as an online action RPG, just like Lost Ark and just like Blue Protocol. Yet, while traversing the large open world, you'll come across countless players out questing, dueling, chatting, role-playing if they're into that, and given this is an enemy game, you best bet there's gonna be some serious ERP going on. MRSSSTIX and I, we save that kind of stuff for the bedroom, or sometimes for the computer room when we turn our cams off. There are an enormous number of different channels for players to log into. Channels serve as a means with which to segregate players, preventing too many people from gathering in the same instance of the game, subsequently overcrowding and likely causing severe latency issues. You're capable of transitioning between channels easily enough. MRSSSTIX and I had to utilize this feature several times to find players to engage world bosses with, and world bosses were utter, absolute chaos, and in the best kind of way. You had 10, 20 players or more, all showing just how bad we all are at group content, engaging the boss without a healer, dying to every mechanic, pulling it outside of its attack range and subsequently resetting it. These fights would last 10 minutes and last 20 minutes. They would be comprised more of walking back to the boss than actually hitting it. Again, chaos. Thankfully, we always had our trusty dedicated healer, Hikari, and other guild members to keep us alive while we mindlessly DPS'd. Typically, players kept to themselves outside of content that required cooperative play. The majority of players that I saw out in the world were too busy doing their own thing to really concern themselves with me, which was completely understandable. I hate having to socialize with people as well. Like, what do we talk about? The weather? Thankfully, the game doesn't entirely penalize you for wanting to play with yourself. Play by yourself. Did I actually say play with yourself? Well, you know what? I guess that kind of ties into the whole ERP thing, so it isn't, entirely disconnected, but you're not penalized for playing by yourself. There are a lot of activities, including the main story, that are done exclusively by yourself, with varying degrees of difficulty that rely solely on your own abilities or lack thereof. Hey, I'm not judging you, unless you're in my group, in which case I'll probably be judging you, but you won't know because I'll be doing it silently. And while you're capable of participating in a lot of content solo, there's just as much, if not more, content available to you as part of a group. Seriously, I'm not going to detail each and every type of content present within the game. You'll see a brief list of options available on screen right now. The majority of it is instance content that you either queue for, you enter with a group, or you tackle solo. Generally, content consists of fighting boss monsters, waves of enemies, solving puzzles, or clearing small dungeons with a mixture of all of the above, except for PvP. PvP is the one type of instance content that completely disregards everything else. PvP, at least from what I experienced, involves equipping whatever weapons allow for optimal CC cycling, and then locking players with as much crowd control as possible to inhibit their movement and their fun, which brings me back to the good old days of RMP and RMD in WoW. Goddamn, I hated being kidney shot into a cyclone, which was then preceded by a polymorph. Dude, anyone that played those specific comps in 3s deserve to have someone pee in their coffee. Now, I think PvP really shines when you allow for additional players to participate together Doing 1v1 matches, which is the only type of PvP currently available right now, is really no different to just dueling someone out in the world. Skill really comes into play when coordinating your CC, your heals, and your abilities with another player to really push the boundaries of your composition. So while I did have some fun, I believe I won approximately 75% of my fights, the PvP seemed too limiting, too small in scale, and ultimately it relied too heavily on which weapons you had access to. Speaking of weapons, I know I have mentioned it multiple times thus far. You can use the term weapon or you can use the term hero interchangeably here, and I'll attempt to explain it as simply as I can. There is a gacha system present within Tower of Fantasy. The gacha system works the same way as it works in every other gacha game. You have a currency, and you use that currency to roll on characters. Characters have their own unique personalities. They have their own strengths, their own weaknesses, their own stories, their own weapon types, their own statistical advantages that they provide, their own elemental affinity, meaning that they are much more powerful overall than non-character specific weapons that you can obtain, which we'll just refer to as common gear. You can equip up to a maximum of 3 weapons and subsequently weapon types at any given time. Weapons like spears or katanas or bows or staves, each type of weapon excels at different things, fitting into its own unique archetype. As an example here, one weapon type might excel at AoE damage while another is more suited to single target damage. One can heal and another might deal elemental damage. Possessing such a large array of different weapons means that you're never locked in to a single class, opening up a world of countless, endless styles of play and of builds. You are required to upgrade your gear, and as you continue to upgrade, things continue to get much more expensive, and materials become much more difficult to obtain. So it's best you focus on what weapons and what style of play you want to pursue in the short term so you don't end up severely limited down the line. While we're on the topic of weapons though, combat in Tower of Fantasy utilizes a hybrid action combat system, meaning that you can freely attack, you can use your abilities without a target. However, if there is a target present, you'll begin to automatically lock onto said target. I personally, and I know this isn't everyone's opinion here, but I found it to be a little bit awkward at times when there were multiple trash enemies around and I wanted to simply kill the elite monster that I was after and move on, yet repeatedly locked onto the trash around before finally engaging the monster I was there for. Yet at the same time, I found it very useful when at a distance from an enemy, as it allowed me to lock on with something like my spear or my sword and then grapple directly to it. You are capable of cycling through enemies with a tab key, like in traditional tab target MMOs, but it locks on to the most obscure target in the distance so often that it almost felt easier to just hard focus the trash that you're already locked with and let it just readjust accordingly. The combat is incredibly fast and arguably has one of the better systems present within the genre. I feel as though it's a little stiffer than games like Soul Worker or PSO2 Genesis or even Genshin Impact or Punishing Great Raven, as are the character animations, especially when climbing, which you'll no doubt notice immediately as you begin doing so. Then again, I'm unaware if 2.0 corrects this or whether it'll remain a detriment hindering its potential success. I know some of you are curious as to the specific rates pertaining to the gacha system in place, and unfortunately, I cannot give you those numbers at present. This was a closed beta test, and as such, everything is completely subject to change upon its full launch, even in its next test stage if it has one. This is further made evident by the fact that they did not have a fully functional cash shop in place, either because they're not sure what specifically they want to have available, or they didn't want players criticizing them ahead of their release. Thankfully, regardless of how the cash shop ultimately turns out, you're capable of earning a lot of premium currency in-game. You'll find various objects out in the world with which you can interact that will offer you 2 different types of currency to use to roll for characters. I believe I did well over 40, maybe 50 rolls total, each roll offering 10 attempts at a character, so 400 to 500 attempts at a character over my weeks playing the game, and I just need to get this off my chest right now. I cannot believe that I still, after several weeks and after hundreds of attempts, did not get Meryl. Like, I was lucky enough to get several different Claudias, but the one single character that I wanted Meryl, the character that I've used a surplus of different times, in the thumbnails for all of my Tower of Fantasy videos was the one single character I could not get. Why does this game hate me? Seriously, look at Meryl. She's depressed that I didn't get her. She's the only character that I didn't get. She feels left out. She feels so alone. It's heartbreaking. This would not be an MMO without a functional guild system though, right? Given MRSSSTIX is going to be no-lifing this when it launches, and I'll definitely be playing on and off myself, we'll probably end up making a guild of our own. Guilds, well, what can I say? They're guilds. They're called crews and this, but that, I don't know, to me it just sounds really stupid. They function as a means with which to avoid having to rely on complete strangers if you need to group up and tackle cooperative content. Otherwise, it functions like any mobile guild system. You can do guild content, you can accumulate guild cards, see access a guild store, etc, etc. Oh, and you also get mounts. And you can ride around on a hoverboard like this, or you can fly through the air on a jetpack like this. Yeah, it's always kind of cool. Finally, and what is arguably the most important aspect of the game, you can create your own waifu or husbando. It doesn't provide the same depth as an anime game like PSO2 New Genesis, but it offers more than most, allowing you to create your ideal waifu for Laifu, or your husbando for cuddles and moral support. Ultimately, I had a lot of fun in Tower of Fantasy's very first global closed beta test, playing the game every day on stream with everyone, slowly exploring the world, unlocking additional story, more characters, new content, tackling more difficult encounters. The first week was some of the most fun that I've had in an MMO in the last year or two. Yet, after the first week, I began to get locked out of progressing. They have content time-gated, which means that once you hit a certain point in the story, you cannot progress further until you've waited the allotted duration, which at times was upwards of 3 days, meaning that I could log in, I could pursue daily content, I could run a few different instances and then immediately log out because there was absolutely nothing else to do other than run the same content for a little to no reward. There's a type of stamina system present, Vitality, that isn't nearly as limiting or penalizing as the stamina system found in other gacha games, as you're capable of replenishing it, but other than repeating the same few instances, I really saw no reason to. At that juncture, I was left highly disappointed with the game. I don't like being told how I can play a game or when I can play a game. Like, I'm a fully grown man. I may not act like it at times, but I can make these choices, I can make these decisions for myself. And then after waiting 3 whole days to continue with the story, you continue for 20 minutes and then you're forced to wait several days more. Yeah, no thank you. Removal of this limitation would be such a drastic improvement to the game and my enjoyment of it, but with this in place and the sheer amount of grinding that is necessary to be competitive, I highly doubt I'll find myself logging in all too often. Daily? Sure. To quickly run what I can, but I'm not a grinder. I have more important things to do with my time. But maybe that'll change. Maybe I'm just being too picky. But this is my time after all. And like you, I need to decide if it's worth the investment. Again, I will be playing both the next test phase of the game if they plan on doing one, and once it fully launches as well. But at the same time, I do not personally expect this to be a game that I necessarily dedicate large portions of my time to. Now, MRSSSTIX on the other hand, that's another question entirely.